All right, so the manifestation of enemies can absolutely play a very significant role in our evolutionary process, especially when we're in the more so beginning and mid phases of that evolutionary process where we're just figuring out who we really are and how to express that level of authenticity to the world. And I have a lot of experience with manifesting enemies, and I didn't always approach having enemies in the healthiest way. But eventually what happened is I gained a lot of perspective and I gained a lot of insight on what it actually means to have enemies and why I was manifesting the enemies in the first place, which is something that's very important to understand. Whenever we're creating anything, we want to know why we're creating it. And of course, we want to understand that we are the creator of whatever the experience is. And we also want to know that we create experiences that are meant to serve us, that are meant to help us, and that are meant to play an evolutionary role. Whether that's an enemy, whether that's an illness, whether that's a betrayal, an abusive relationship, anything that we create is meant to serve us to the highest capacity that it possibly can. And it's our role as creator to not only know that we're the creator, that we're the source of our experience, but to also learn how to extract the positive from that negative. And enemies are excellent evolutionary guides into this process of realizing what we are and in the process of extracting a positive from the negative. And this is what true alchemy really is. So I'm going to take you back in time a little bit, and I'm going to talk about the person that I used to be. So I used to be a gang member. I used to be in the streets, jail, prison, things of that nature. And these cycles began when I was very young and continued for a majority of my adulthood until I decided to change my life. And, during that time period, I had manifested a lot of enemies. So I used to end up in places that are known as juvenile lockup. Some of you might know it as juvie or juvenile detention. And in these places, I was constantly fighting. There were times when I would see other kids and they would see me, and immediately we would just get it shaken. We would run at each other. We would get our punches in, our kicks, whatever it was. Sometimes there were weapons involved. And, essentially it would get broken up. We would get slammed on the floor and restrained, and we would do it all again, And it was this continuous cycle. Then when I went to county jail at the age of 17, it was the same thing. I was always in this fight or flight type of energy, and I was certainly choosing fight. I was fighting against other people. When we saw each other, it was on sight. There were weapons, there were punches, things of that nature. We were fighting. And I lived in this cycle of experiencing enemies for a very long time. And then when I started to spiritually progress and spiritually evolve through the medium of a lot of the occult practices that I was doing, I noticed that I would manifest enemies once again. And, I wasn't willing to risk my freedom for these kinds of people at this point because I was evolving and I was progressing, but I would utilize psychic warfare on them, meaning I would perform some type of ritual, usually, and I would send destructive energy to them. And most of the time, that energy would actually manifest in their lives, and it would cause them, to experience a lot of conflict and a lot of very destructive circumstances that would come into manifestation. But then, even from that space, I began to evolve even more. And I started to really think about the nature of having enemies. And I realized that enemies are meant to serve us and they're our own creation, and we don't actually need to fight against them. We don't need to fist fight them. We don't need to psychically fight them or anything like that. we need to take responsibility for our role in what is manifesting. And we always have a role. There's no such thing as a victim in our universe. There's the law of energetic resonance that says if anything happens to you, it is happening for you, and it is happening from within you, but externalizing itself outwards. So an enemy is always going to be a shadow reflection that's not only meant to provide a contrast to your authentic self, because usually an enemy, if they're attacking you, they're not coming from an authentic space, because, when we're being authentic, we don't want to hurt people or attack people. We're not concerned about other people in that way, and we don't want to hurt people, right? So it provides a contrast, and it also serves you as acting as a trigger to bring up deeply suppressed emotions that are stored within your energetic structure in general. And these deeply suppressed emotions are going to be in association with trauma that you haven't processed. And it's this trauma that actually keeps us in a lower frequency state. So when you're going through an evolutionary process, you will manifest these different triggers, and the most significant triggers are going to be enemies. Whether it's someone that wants to harm you physically, maybe it's somebody online and you're a content creator and they're launching a smear campaign against you. Maybe your ex-partner comes out of nowhere and starts making accusations against you. However it's manifesting, it is meant to be a trigger to help you tune in to your emotional body. Because most human beings on our planet are disconnected from their emotional body because they've experienced what is known as fragmentation within their psyche. This fragmentation causes us to create these protective adaptations that separate us from what we're truly feeling inside. And a lot of times, the denser, heavier emotions are going to be associated with early childhood trauma that we don't necessarily know how to process. And when we're talking about spiritual self-development and just evolution as a species in general, we have to go into that shadow space. We have to go into that trauma to feel through it and to release it from the body and from the energetic field, so we can actually raise our frequency into the frequency or into the state of authenticity, which is a very powerful state to exist in, and it's a state that most human beings are disconnected from. So your enemy, when this kind of person shows up, even though consciously they might be trying to harm you, on a deeper subconscious level, they are there to help you. And in many ways, we can say both of you have a subconscious agreement with each other to help each other evolve. So I really want you to soak in what I'm saying. The way this works is because as human beings, we share a mass collective consciousness. Every single one of us is interconnected. There's not one person in your reality that you are separate from. So when someone comes into your reality, or just anything that's in your reality in general, let's say, we're talking about people here, it's going to be subconscious programs, subconscious energies, and subconscious patterns that are creating the reality that you're sharing with other people. And within the subconscious, we can even say the unconscious is what I like to sometimes call the superconscious. And this is going to be directly associated with your higher self and how your higher self is orchestrating certain themes for you to experience. And as humans, what really helps us grow is the evolutionary tension caused by enemies. So you and your enemy are actually in agreement to have an evolutionary experience with each other. Maybe they're the aggressor and you're not, or maybe you're the aggressor and, they're the more passive individual. But, regardless, everything in reality is interconnected, and everything, all experiences that you can possibly think of, are meant to serve an evolutionary purpose. Now, enemies can also help you let go of things. Let me give you an example, and I've been through this, so I'm speaking from personal experience. I'm a content creator. And, as I started gaining a following, and there were certain people that saw that people were resonating with what I was saying because they were very insecure, that threatened them in many, many different ways. So it caused them to launch a smear campaign on me to where they brought up things that took place years ago in my past and tried to make it seem like I'm that person now, when in reality, I'm very transparent about the person that I used to be. And I actually use it to give other people support in what they're going through, because I've worked through a lot of shadows. And, I was as bad as they could potentially get. I mean, I spent most of my life incarcerated, and a lot of my life being a very violent criminal. So there's nothing that I'm not willing to be transparent about. That's the old version of me, but this is who I am now. But there were stages in my process as a content creator where people would bring that up and they would use it to try to get people to think that I'm like a bad person now. They were doing this in a very strategic and manipulative way. But all of that always backfired on them completely, to where, a lot of those people shortly after, or sometimes it took a little time, but every single one of them went through a lot of destruction and a lot of catalysts themselves through the cause and effect of what they were sending my way, when in reality, I was just doing the best I could to be authentic. Does that mean I'm perfect? No, I'm a human being like every single one of you, but it is truly my intention to be the most authentic version of myself that I possibly can. And when you're operating from that intention, you will notice that the scales always even out, and what people are sending to you is going to come right back to them, sometimes in an intensified way. But during some of these periods, I wasn't necessarily fully aware that I was actually over-identified with my image as a content creator. And this is the point of kind of what I'm saying. I was over-identified with my image as a content creator. And so what happened? I manifested, some massive smear campaigns that actually got me to depolarize my identification with that identity that I was programmed into, that wasn't necessarily fully authentic to who I really was. And it brought me back into that self energy. It brought me back into that authenticity. And it also, brought up certain emotions that I needed to feel, things that were stored in me from early childhood trauma and things of that nature. And it gave me the opportunity to release those energies from my body and from my energetic field. So looking back on it, I can see how when I manifested some of these smear campaigns, it's because I was over-identified with this idea of being a content creator that, even though I was, providing people with value, on that internal level, I was over-identified with the image, and I was over-identified with having a following and things of that nature. So I created that catalyst, which helped me depolarize that identification and brought me back into my center, where I was able to be more authentic to who I really am and be more authentic as a content creator. So the manifestation of those quote unquote enemies absolutely helped me and absolutely served me. And that's just one of many different examples I could give you. And, when we're manifesting an enemy, they also serve as a catalyst and as a trigger to bring up what we need to process on an emotional level, so we can move out of energetic resonance with those kinds of realities. So on an overall level, your quote unquote enemies are in a certain overall frequency. And if you're manifesting them into your reality in that way, this means there's a part of you that you need to go into and you need to, basically become aware of and process that is in a similar frequency. So your enemies will reveal to you all of these different shadow aspects of yourself that you might not be aware of. They will give you the chance to process those aspects and then give you the chance to release those energies from your energetic field and from your body in general. Enemies are so important when it comes to the evolutionary process of the human species in general, because we often learn through contrast. Sometimes when you're being really authentic to who you are, you might manifest somebody that shows you the shadow aspect of authenticity. That's going to be inauthenticity, and that can help you refine how you express your authentic self. And over time, you actually will lose, or I'll say it like this: as you're releasing certain energies, trapped energies from your body that need to be felt, expressed, and then released, you're going to move out of resonance with realities where these kinds of people can have an effect on you. And this is what it means to raise your frequency. Enemies are a major catalyst that help us refine ourselves and help us raise our frequency by becoming aware of shadow aspects of ourselves and by processing the emotions, the trapped emotions that those shadow aspects of our being are holding. Think about how it feels sometimes when you have someone that's trying to make your life hard. When somebody's saying something about you that's not true, or maybe they're even trying to physically harm you. I've certainly been through that in my life once upon a time, as I've explained as well. There might be fear. There might be anger. There might be depression. There might be sadness. There might be other very polarizing negative emotions. Well, you're not going to feel something that's not already a part of your energetic makeup, or that's not already inside of you. So you might actually be manifesting the physical representation of those emotions in the form of the enemy, so you can become aware that everything in your reality is just a mirror mirroring back to you different parts of yourself, so you can become aware of those parts. And our awareness, our consciousness in general, is so powerful that it will actually depolarize over time anything that is carrying, a dense or a negative charge. So I've went through many different stages of having enemies. The old version of myself would seek to harm them physically, would seek to utilize some kind of violence against them. Then when I moved into more of a spiritual space, there was a stage in my process where I used a lot of psychic warfare, different rituals where I was sending destructive energy to these kinds of people. And, now I exist in a space where if I do manifest this kind of person, I love this person. I appreciate this person. And I know if they're coming against me, they're not being authentic to who they really are. And I think it's really unfortunate that, a person would want to harm another person who is doing the absolute best that they can. And I think it's really unfortunate that a lot of people will actually stay in that space where they're hating on other people. They're very driven by anger and hatred and things of that nature. And, in a sense, I send love to that person. Now, does that mean that I'm going to put up with anyone's shit? Absolutely not. I will never be a sucker. Because, being a quote-unquote sucker means that you're not loving yourself. And you might even have some people-pleasing tendencies. Or you might be operating from fear. And there's other things as well. But regardless, I will never, ever be that. But I'm in a space where I love myself so much that I also love all people, even people that don't want to see me win or people that don't agree with me or don't want me to succeed. I just understand that those kinds of people are hurt. And if they do come into my reality, I'm creating the experience to serve me. And there's no reason to hate that kind of person, even though they consciously might not be trying to, help me or offer me any insight. As the creator and the source of my entire experience, I don't care about their intention necessarily. I care about my deeper intention to grow and to evolve by seeing everything as my own creation and understanding that as human beings, we are interconnected, you know, together. We are all connected by the same source energy. So, what I'm saying is, I love people, and I'm not constantly manifesting scenarios where I have enemies anymore, but there have been periods since I've moved into the space that I'm expressing now where I have manifested some very significant conflicts with people, and I've still been able to love those kinds of people from a distance and with a very firm boundary up. Of course, once again, I'm not putting up with anyone's nonsense, but I also understand that they're hurt. And I also understand that the experience is meant to help me evolve. So why would I carry hatred in relation to the experience or in relation to the person, even though the person isn't necessarily, trying to help me evolve? They're just probably very hateful, and they're choosing to want to release that energy onto me. But when you're coming from the space that I'm expressing right now, the scales will always even out. They will always have to face themselves no matter what. And I've seen this happen many times where people have come against me while I'm in the space that I'm expressing now, and they always got what they deserved, sometimes very, very quickly. So you don't have to fight your enemies in any way, whether it's physical, psychically, or, you don't have to defend yourself online if you're going through a smear campaign and make videos about the other person or anything like that. All you need to do is actualize yourself as the creator, meaning understanding that you're creating the experience and you want to have a deep inner knowing that the experience is meant to serve you, and you don't want to hold on to heavy emotions of wanting to destroy the person or hating the person or anything like that. Now, if they're manifesting in your reality, they might actually meant to be a trigger to bring up those emotions, but the point isn't to hang on to the emotions or to project them onto the person. The point is to be with them, realize they have a deeper origin that's predating the person that you manifested, nurture those emotions, and then release those energies that have been trapped for a very long time. Release them from your body and from your energetic field, and use your enemy as a tool to raise your frequency in a very significant way. So, with that being said, there are going to be points in your process where you manifest enemies, but it is always meant to serve you. And that's what I want you to understand, and that's what I want to communicate in this video today.